We're, about a week into it now. So what's your biggest takeaway, Rick, from training camp that maybe has surprised you a little bit?
Well, you never know how somebody's going to come back from an injury, right? And particularly a guy that didn't take a snap in the National Football League. But man, Walker has looked tremendous in this training camp, and I think for him to come back, I think he had, and who keeps these stats? Scott and those guys keep these stats, right? But for him to have a sack in all 5 practices, right? Albeit in team play, he's going to play with that left knee brace. It looks cumbersome, but he has a great attitude. He says he has the same quick twitch, and we know he has bend and those things, and he's a different type of body. He's also a guy, when you talk about Vita Vea being out, that can play a little bit inside as well as on the edge. So, but they were so high on him. Central Arkansas, 2-time FBS Defensive Player of the Year. It's just great to see somebody, and he had a full year because it was the 3rd practice. I think he got hurt a year ago. To get back, and boy, does he look like he could really provide some real depth for them on the edge and maybe someplace else.
Yeah, they're super excited about him, Greg. We do the Pewter Report Camp Diary series with him. We started it last year. It only lasted 1 episode. Then he got hurt, as you mentioned, Rick. The 3rd practice, right before they got to pads. Yeah, so we're doing it again this year to make up for that. He's been a willing participant. We're glad that he has the second opportunity. We're glad to see him actually get to full pads this time. Yeah. And one of the things that he told us at Pewter Report was, it's kind of interesting how Ruben Bain and I are kind of the same body type. He's about an inch taller. Yeah, David's 6'1", Bain's 6'2". They're both about 260 pounds. And you kind of see the freakish bend that David Walker has. It's akin to Ruben Bain. Now, he's a 4th round pick compared to Bain, who played, at a team that went all the way to the national championship game at Miami last year. But Walker has been impressive, and he's probably not the starter that you necessarily want. But you know what? He's probably going to be better than Hassan Reddick was last year at age 31, and he's cooked. I'm hearing some whispers that if he's as good as advertised when training camp, gets into this preseason game, so we'll talk about the Jets coming up on deck next week. If he flashes in these preseason games, he could get from that 3rd string where he's running with Chris Braswell right now, Greg, all the way up to the 2nd string where he's either replacing Anthony Nelson or Akwadim Muhammad in that lineup with that second hockey shift that like Todd Bowles likes to run. He gets Yaya Diaby and Ruben Bain, then he brings in the next line shift and then the next line shift. I think the arrow's pointing up for David Walker.
Oh, yeah, and he doesn't have to be a huge player for them. He can be a 3rd down, a nickel rusher, a specialist, if you will. They've got Bain and Diaby to take the bulk of the snaps at this position. So what you want is to have guys that can come in and there's not drop off in. Let's say he gets 15, 20 snaps a game, which again is probably a little bit less than Muhammad will get. Yeah. But if he's your 4th edge rusher and he's productive, okay, plays on special teams, that's a huge win. I think we've had a year of wondering if he could get back to the excitement they had a summer ago, because it in the time just as you were finding out who he was gone a year ago. Right. And now the 2 things that stand out to me is that you don't notice that he's injured. Yeah. And no one even remembers that he's a small school guy, that this is Southern Arkansas and Central Arkansas. And he hasn't played at anything close to the NFL level. When you watch him in practice, he fits in. He looks like the rest of the guys. There's a burst. There's an explosiveness. There's an excitement about him. Yeah. Again, if he had 5 sacks as a rookie in a part-time role, that's a huge win for a 4th-round pick off a major injury. Huge.
Yeah. So the thing about David Walker that's interesting, we're going to get into your surprise of Bucs camp here in just a second, but David Walker at 6'1", 260 pounds can literally do a backflip.
Yes,
a backflip. So when you see Tez Johnson do his backflips, he's about $155, right? And we're all kind of like amazed at his aerial acrobatics, but David Walker weighs about 100 pounds more, and he can do it. But this guy, he has done some. He did a backflip the other day after he caught a touchdown, and he's really putting on a show in training camp. Is he not, Greg?
Yeah. Absolutely. And the backflip's crazy. Like they had the World Cup highlights, and I think he did his in celebrating after his fake World Cup goal on video this summer, and everyone's like, "Wow, I guess that knee's okay if he's doing backflips on his knee." The other guy that was that big, and I remember seeing do backflips when he was in college, was Jason Pierre-Paul. And again, by no means is he JPP. Does he need to be JPP in his career? But it speaks to athleticism, freakish explosiveness, to not care how big your body is, and to have the confidence to pull it off. Again, I think the fact that he's doing backflips says he feels pretty good about where the knee is. He's somebody that I think we're going to see play in preseason, and that's his first chance to kind of validate all the behind-the-scenes excitement for who he is.
Yeah. And Tez Johnson, I mean, he really has caught your attention, everybody's attention, really. And Greg is in a situation where it's like you look at the depth chart, and last year he was wide receiver 5, right? You had Mike, you had Chris, you had Jalen, you had Emeka Ibuka, who was the first round pick. He was really wide receiver 4. And then you had Tez Johnson. And there were plenty of games where Emeka Ibuka was wide receiver 1 and Tez Johnson was wide receiver number 2. He actually had 5 touchdowns last year, which was the same amount of touchdowns that Mike and Chris had combined. That's not bad for a 5th round pick, but he's kind of picking up where he left off. Oh, and by the way, he's wide receiver 5 again on the depth chart, right behind Chris and Emeka Ibuka and Jalen McMillan and now Ted Hurst. And now you've got Tez Johnson back at number 5, but he's kind of saying, hey, Zach Robinson, don't forget about me.
Right. And what Tez Johnson does, and what the depth of his receivers do, it's crazy to think about, because you think about losing Mike Evans and taking the head off the beast, if you will. And it's impossible to think, wow, could they be better in a year where they don't have Mike Evans? And I really think as a group, as a position group, they really could. It seems odd to think about, but Mike Evans only had 3 touchdowns last year. He only played 8 games. So they already kind of had life without Mike Evans for about half of last season. Nobody wants that. No one chooses that. But I do think as a result of that last year, you see Tez Johnson play so much more and be so much more prepared than he would be if everyone was healthy. If everyone's healthy, he's barely dressing as a rookie last year. So I think he's better for it. And then you think about just the depth. Obviously, Chris Godwin is the known commodity. He's the leader. He's the veteran. He's the $20 million receiver that's back. The next 4 are all 24 years old or younger. Okay, this is a really young group, which means they're all on rookie contracts. They're all inexpensive, and they're all growing and learning together. So in Ibuka, in McMillan, in Tez, and now in Ted Hurst as well, I just think there's a lot of upside to the group. Tez is the one that probably has surprised us the most. He had one practice last week where he had 2 within a minute of each other, 2 back of the end zone toe tap touchdown, and then caught maybe the nicest ball that Baker's thrown in camp so far. It's just a deep ball between 2 defenders that he went for a long touchdown on. So again, you don't even know how Tez fits into this offense right now. If everybody's healthy, he's at best the 4th receiver probably. But I do think he's a guy that they know they can bring in, again, 10, 15 snaps a game, test that defense downfield. Baker likes to throw the deep ball. He's certainly connected with Tez last year. The depth of this receiver group is what has people thinking that they can weather moving on without Mike Evans.
Yeah. And Greg mentions Chris Godwin, and maybe that's a little bonus surprise because he looks like he didn't really suffer a fractured ankle. He's out there catching passes from Baker Mayfield, just doing Chris Godwin things, securing the catch, moving the chains, picking up yards, just looking like kind of the old Chris Godwin out there. And one of the things too that I noticed was out there in that monsoon that they were trying to practice in the other day, you saw wide receivers dropping passes left and right. Chris Godwin was not dropping anything, even the wet balls.
Yeah, I've said this before, but I'll say it again. If there was a guy, if I was in a street fight and I had to pick a Buccaneer, there's a lot of big men you might want to choose, right, to protect you. I think the toughest guy on this football team really is Chris Godwin.